All right, let's go ahead and get started. It seems like my bandwidth is going to be okay, at least for now. Cool. Well, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Nancy, for joining us. I just want to introduce everybody to Nancy's work, if you haven't, or her bio, if you haven't already looked into it. Nancy Baker Cahill is an artist working at the intersection of fine art, new media, and activism. She is the founder and artistic director of Fourth Wall, a free augmented reality AR public art platform exploring resistance and inclusive creative expression. In 2019, she received an Impact Maker to Watch Award at LA City Hall and was recognized by the LA Times as one of the art's faces of future. Baker Cahill is a featured TEDx speaker and is currently one of the 10 artist scholars in the Berggruen Institute's inaugural 2020 Transformations of the Human Fellowship. So that was read straight from the bio, but Nancy's also a dear friend of mine whose work I greatly admire. She's a wonderful person, wonderful artist, and I'm so pleased to have her here today. And I'm really so excited for all the students that get to hear more about your work in detail, Nancy.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And just to piggyback on what Kate said, I have so much respect and admiration for Kate. And she, just fun fact, was the first person to share a VR art experience with me. I was training how to use the Vive. I was going to volunteer. I thought I had a little more time than I actually had. And so one of her early pieces was one of my first experiences, and I found it unbelievably inspiring, and it arguably catapulted me onto the journey that I'm on now. So I can't thank you enough for so many things, but that being chief among them. So if it's okay with everyone, I'm just going to mute myself. I'll just mute myself for 40 minutes. You don't mind, right? You just look at the pictures. I will kill the video and share my screen and just dive right in. Okay. So I'm just going to disappear for a second and share my screen. And if everyone, Ty, everyone can hear me? Yes. Yes, great, awesome. Okay, so I'm super excited to talk to you today about, this is a title, it could be any number of titles, but I really want to talk to you about augmented reality, public art, and the fusion of fine art, AR or XR art, and activism. And what you're looking at right now is a gorgeous image by Carolina Quesado. This is from a public art exhibition, AR art exhibition I'll talk about a little bit later, called Defining Line along the LA River. And this is a piece she made about the privatization of water. And if you want to see this piece, it's actually up in Elysian Park, right at, I think it's called Grandview Lookout. But anyway, just a kind of a showstopper image I love to start with. And before I get into anything, this is more like a collective embrace, I would call it. I find that in this moment that's really challenging for all of us. You know, we're all living on screen pretty much more than normal. And for me, I've found that science fiction has been this extraordinary balm and has allowed me to sort of imagine other realities that offer a way out and through. And I'm a total nerd about this, but this is a recent show, the latest Ridley Scott, called Raised by Wolves. And I encourage you to watch it if you're interested in sort of android cyborg life and extremely powerful female identified androids. That's really apropos of nothing, but more just to say, I think I want to start this off on a hopeful note, because some of what I'll share is you know, some tough subject matter. So I just want to kind of remind everyone of the power of storytelling, especially in really challenging moments like the one we're in. So just to echo what Kate said, I do indeed work at the intersection of fine art and new media and activism. Drawing is my first language. It's also my first love. In any media I work in, I use drawing to express whatever I'm trying to understand or work through. And there's my drawing practice has become really inextricably linked with my digital practice. And so I do want to underscore that from the jump, and also talk about the ways in which that plays out in an activist sense. Just to give you a tiny bit of conceptual background, and I won't linger on this, but you know, this is where I'm coming from as an artist. I really have always interpreted the body as an intimate source of knowledge. And I'm interested in sort of illustrating the tension between extremes, those things that are unfixed, uncontained, uncontainable. and in the body and in the ways that we exist in the world. And so I'm interested in how we understand reality through conscious sensory engagement. So the goal is to examine how that embodied knowledge allows us to mediate and resist systems of oppression and control. And all of the contradictions and these extremes that I'm dealing with, the contradictions that are inherent in XR, in new media, are whether it's invisibility and visibility, the real and the virtual, all of those things to me really mirror the push-pull of the opposing forces within the body. So it's a very natural outgrowth of the drawing practice. And overall, I'm just really interested in challenging understandings of consciousness. And when I look back at my work over the many, many years, and what you're looking at is an immersive video installation and a 360 sculpture made out of drawings, and then this large scale drawing from a series I did inspired by a book on sexual assault, actually, and how trauma lives in the body. All of these things I now realize looking back were stabs at an immersive experience. And it wasn't until I made the series on the left, my third series, that I took the step into VR. Someone basically had been staring at the video for a long time, not the video, excuse me, the drawing, and remarked to me that it expressed exactly how she felt. And that was intoxicating to me. And I thought, well, I want you to feel it more. I want to put you inside of it. And it was at that moment that, after a lot of creative fits and starts trying to do that and continuing to try to do that, a colleague said to me, well, why don't you just do it in VR? And that was sort of my big light bulb moment. But in addition to my studio practice, I also have a public practice. And in 2010, I had the enormous privilege of initiating a collaborative art project with individuals at Homeboy Industries. I don't know if everyone's familiar with Homeboy, but it's an extraordinary organization here in LA that empowers formerly incarcerated and gang involved youth. It helps them get back on their feet, get job training. And I had developed a series prior to meeting everyone at Homeboy called Bullet Blossoms, where I shot my paintings from behind and then painted blossoms around them, because I was really interested in sort of the intoxicating effects of violence in American culture and the narcotic effects of that, and healing coexisting with despair. And so I brought this project to them, and together I worked with individuals who really in many cases never thought of themselves as artists, but through the democratic medium of collage told their stories and really very, very quickly found their artistic voices. And the collaborations, but especially their storytelling, was so immensely powerful that it became a truly transformative and foundational project in my life, and underscored my commitment to inclusive storytelling. It was kind of a game-changing experience for me, and I'm forever indebted to these incredibly brave individuals who took this journey with me. But that's just foundation for what I'm about to share. So back to this idea of an integrated practice, an integrated fine art and digital practice, which I'm sure Kate talks to you about a lot. As I say, I'm clearly really interested in these moments of cataclysmic rupture. So it seems to be a recurring theme. And so the drawing on the left is on the upper left is pre-VR. It's from a series I did called Manifestos. In the middle, after having drawn in VR for probably about a year, this started in around, I guess, late 2016. And then more in 2017, the drawing had completely changed after working in VR, and the way that I represented mass and velocity and speed and space had changed dramatically. And here's my first sort of official VR drawing called Hollow Point 101. I drew it with tilt brush, but I didn't love the presets, so I ended up creating my own brush strokes that I have an incredible tech team, let's be clear, that I work with. I couldn't have done this on my own. But I really wanted in these VR drawings to give the, to again, put you inside of a drawing, but to give the user agency and choice as to how they experienced it, that they could move through it led by their own curiosity. And here's just a really quick, another example of a drawing on paper and how it materialized and appeared in VR. I wish I could put you inside this one. I did this one listening to countless political podcasts. That was several years ago. So the great thing, as you all know about VR, is that it's this transformative, incredibly immersive, there's really no medium like it in the world, but it tends to be, this is changing slightly now, but it tends to be a fairly singular experience, and there is a barrier to entry. In other words, the barrier to entry is the hardware that you need to experience it. And we can get into all of that later. But I had the opportunity to share these drawings as public art on the Sunset Strip. And it was amazing because especially at night, the drawings really did appear volumetric. They did appear to penetrate the space. They were sandwiched in tiny little increments between ads for Ellen and Seth Meyers. But I'm sure that, you know, and there were no car crashes. It was awesome. I'm sure people were confused about the apocalyptic imagery. But this too ended up being a bit of a turning point for me. I thought, this is awesome. I love sharing this in a public, you know, sphere. But how could I share these even more broadly? How could I make them more available to a larger audience? And how in the process could I challenge what public art is and what it could be? Because especially having worked at Homeboy, I really thought a lot about gatekeepers and a lot about access. How, you know, who has access to art, who considers themselves an artist, and how are all these things stratified and reinforced by certain institutions and the status quo. So my amazing partners again suggested an AR app, and that was the birth of the Fourth Wall app. And I'm gonna try and move through this part quickly because this is the part where I usually just get, you'll see it, super excited about some of these collaborations. But this really was an incredible opportunity, again, to offer agency and choice to the people who are using the app. For example, the early iteration of the app, I had my VR drawings translated into AR that people could put anywhere they wanted, anywhere in the world. They're now animated and have shadows, but at the time, they were really just these AR objects in 360, these sort of sculptures in space. And in addition to that, again, back to this idea of access, you know, I really wanted anyone to be able to use the app and to be mobile with the app. So we created a teleport function that allowed users to go inside the studio. I really wanted, again, to underscore this idea of this is a studio practice, and it's kind of exploding this idea of or not exploding the idea, but offering this kind of entry into an artist sanctuary and creative space. And also so people could see the connection to the drawings on paper. It's gonna be a little bit loud, I'm sorry. I need to figure out how to mute this one, but. And in this case, you could be standing in the middle of the street and you know, walk into the studio, look around, get up close to the drawings, and that was kind of awesome. And we also had a volumetric capture of me talking about the conceptual underpinnings of the work, which mercifully you do not need to see or listen to, and it's since been removed from the app. So people did amazing things. They put these all over the world, literally, even on subways. There were these kind of extraordinary collaborations between me and strangers. And people just did their own amazing things. And these span the range of human emotions. You know, these are some of the funnier ones. I love these so much. This is pretty much my favorite, although it's been recently rivalled. Me just putting this like crazy explosion on a baggage claim carousel, I just thought was brilliant. And then recently someone sent me this, which this feels so perfect to our current moment. I just have to share this. There's also something about the ambient sound in that one that really is kind of the coup de grace. People used it in quarantine, you can see, in classrooms, I don't know, and created real poetry too. You know, this piece on the right is a photographer who used the app in this wildly inventive way. And then on the left, a woman who had just had a double mastectomy. And I love the way she really, you know, integrated her own body into the artwork, where you can't really tell where her body begins and the drawing ends and vice versa. That really takes my breath away. But another turning point was when my dear friend Tanya Aganiga, I think Kate knows her too, she's an amazing artist, she does a lot of activist work at the border. She took the app to the border, this is in, you know, whatever, early 2018, and she put it in the United States and pulled it through the border wall into Mexico. And that really took my breath away, because it not only underscored that art is and always should be borderless, and the borderlessness of this particular medium, but also that it could be used toward resistance, toward political aims, toward really thoughtful, rigorous work dedicated to some of these themes and issues that we're all collectively facing right now. So that gave rise to the Coordinates platform, which still exists. And I've since hosted a number of public art AR art exhibitions through Coordinates, but it's basically a geolocation feature within the app. Because I went back to my team again and I said, how could we, again, amplify, expand, make this bigger, make it more available? And I worked with, for the very first iteration of Coordinates, I wanted to make myself a guinea pig. So I'd been thinking a lot about the worst mass shooting in US history, which was in Las Vegas. You may remember in, I think it was 2017. And given our, as someone recently said, the fire hose news cycle, I just thought, there's so much that's being lost, that's not being remembered. And so I drove out to Vegas. This was my very first geolocated piece. And this is a piece called Hurt Colors. I've been thinking a lot about Civil War when I did this this painting, and it's there to this day. And again, when Dr. Ford gave her testimony against now Justice Kavanaugh, I pulled one of the drawings from my SURD series, again, back to this idea of trauma in the body, since this was something that had been kicked up for a lot of us in that moment. And I added the word unprotected because then as now, the ERA has not been ratified. And so I had to find a collaborator in DC. And that was another really interesting thing that happened, which is that, this is a innately and inherently collaborative experience. I had to rely on someone to be there to say, no, it's facing the wrong direction. It's too big, it's too high, whatever. And so for 30 minutes, I and a stranger worked together toward this common goal. And it's just been a beautiful outgrowth of the whole process. And these are just a few other examples of other artists that you may or may not know: Deborah Scacco, Miko Hebron, Tanya Aganiga, again, Kentura Davis, all of whom chose very specific locations for their work, for the resonance that they would have in those spots. And that was actually the question I asked the artists at the time. I said, where would your work have the most resonance and meaning outside of a traditional white cube or an institution, again, of permission? This is Beatriz Cortez's work. I'm sure you all know her work. She's amazing. She was also an early collaborator of mine, and she wanted to put her piece, which also deals with simultaneity and post-human imaginaries, in two places. And I just want to signal this particularly because not only does her work conceptually already resonate with this medium, but she did something along the Rio Grande in Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, which was to honor Claudia Gomez Gonzalez, an immigrant from Guatemala who was murdered by a border guard as she was swimming across the river to try and get into the United States. And so it was also the first time in doing this work where, she wanted to memorialize a space. She wanted to say, this mattered, this happened here. You may not know it. This may be something that's been erased from history, but I'm going to claim this for her. And I'm going to call this out and honor her memory. Just a few more examples of Coordinates, both in New York and here, Shizu Saldamando, Julie Weitz, and Michelle Asselin in DC. All of these are topical. All of them have political resonances. Anyone who knows me knows I'm obsessed with surveillance and surveillance capitalism, and virtually everything, everything related to surveillance, including algorithmic obedience training and facial recognition and all kinds of profiling and data mining. And this is a piece I was invited to do a piece on surveillance in 2018. And I just wanted to do something really simple. I wanted to just use a very simple graphite drawing to suggest an Oculus overhead. And I collaborated with my sound, at the time, sound collaborator, unfortunately, my late sound collaborator, my cousin, to make a soundtrack to go with it. And one of the things I just wanted to briefly touch on is the extraordinary amplification of the experience when you add sound. And I think that this is something that I've learned really acutely recently. And I didn't realize it as much at the time, but it makes an enormous difference. And I just want to give you a quick glimpse of this as well. So it's pretty creepy. And I have placed this all over the world because, of course, surveillance is global and it's omnipresent. It also allows you, this medium, to be to kind of have guerrilla interventions and to be nimble. So in both cases, Trump was giving rallies, and the first one was in 2018. Most recently, this was in 2019, where you see Jeffrey Epstein. It was called The Ghost of Jeffrey Epstein. But I collaborated with anonymous collaborators on these, and again, there was a certain amount of risk involved here because this was in Texas. I'll just play you.
The Democrats want to replace freedom with socialism.
Anyway, that was the whole what's so bad about white nationalism thing. There's a lot of risk for the person on the ground taking the footage, but I think these are just a really a unique opportunity to use the medium subversively. Again, really quickly, sort of defining line, an AR exhibition here in Los Angeles, which if you're interested, you could go to fourthwallapp.org and see some of these artists. We, had the opportunity to work with Tongva artists, all of whom were dealing with issues related to climate change, gentrification, colonization, and erasure and cultural erasure. After defining line, I was invited to be a part of the Desert X Biennial. And even though my work pipeline tends to be drawings on paper, I always start with renderings. And then I draw them in VR, and then they're translated into AR. So it's a multifaceted process. But these are two of the drawings I did in VR. I don't think we have time to go into them. But they ended up being the two that I used at Desert X over two specific sites. One was over the wind farms. These both were, and one was over the Salton Sea. And both of these drawings were intended to address climate change. I just read Timothy Morton's book, Hyperobjects, and it really impacted me deeply. And I'd been thinking a lot about what's man-made, and even in our attempts to mitigate climate change, how effective really is it? So I just want to quickly show you what the piece, I was also able to really scale these works up, make them really monumental land artworks. And that's how Margin of Error ended up looking over the Salton Sea. And this magical thing happened, which is that, people of all, from all walks of life would converge to experience these things. And inevitably somebody would have forgotten their phone, or they didn't have access to the tech or whatever. And these spontaneous, like, impromptu conversations and bonds were formed. And it was just really amazing. People would talk about the work, they'd share the images with each other, and a lot of them became very performative. And it just felt like this super, super generative, positive experience. So that was really a joy for me. And as I said, I've been thinking a lot about the Civil War and cultural Civil War, I should say. And I've been thinking a lot about contested spaces, and also about parts of the United States that really don't get a lot of airtime, attention. I think we focus a lot on the coasts. And my own family's history is in the Deep South, and I really wanted to do something there. So I collaborated with Jesse Damiani, who Kate also knows, and he's an amazing collaborator, and another individual in this realm, in the XR realm. And together we curated the show in New Orleans. We did a lot of research and asked a similar question to coordinates. We asked the artists there, all of whom I met through, almost like a game of telephone. Like, do you know this person? Do you know this person? It was the most beautiful, organic immersion in a community that I've ever experienced. And said, what is a contested site to you? And what would that look, what artwork would you pair with that site? This is the generally. So really quickly, this is a piece outside of Orleans Parish Prison that draws a clear connection between the titans of the fast food industry and the prison industrial complex. Slavery time, again, calling out the crossroad. This is where the original slave pens were not held, but it's where they were installed, at this one intersection, Chartres and Esplanade. And this was also a call out. It was to call out history. It was to reclaim that space, and also to an expression of solidarity with all the children at the time who were in cages here. And just a few other examples. I know we don't have a ton of time. Just felt it was extremely powerful when Ron Theron put his black and white figures on the train tracks and played this soundtrack. These are all, and Don Dideau's asked a frog over the Superdome to address Katrina and that disastrous rescue effort. So really powerful. This was, it was the first time AR ever made me cry. I just found these stories so extraordinarily powerful and moving and resonant in this moment. And I'm just gonna close out the Battlegrounds piece with this photograph by Chandra McCormick. This is the Holy Family Spiritual Church. There were a series of churches in the lower Ninth Ward which were decimated by Katrina, and they were anchors of the community, and they were sources of great therapeutic value and community value. They were vilified by white churches as being black magic and voodoo, which they were not. And they had all female identified leadership. So that was, or women identified leadership. So that was also clearly a threat. And Chandra really felt she wanted to, again, reclaim that space, to make the invisible visible, and to say, this matters, this was here, this still matters to our community, a community that was being gentrified. Community programming is a huge part of my projects, and this is just a quick example of time in the lower Ninth Ward. It was just a magical day where we worked with kids, and we asked them to say, where would your work have the most resonance? And they just did amazing things. I still grin when I think of it. And this is a quick example. I was invited to be an artist in residence by Facebook at their LA office. And I've been thinking a lot about biometric data and data mining again, and all the ways and all the things that are taken from us and projected upon us. And so I really wanted to represent the human body as particulate, dissolving, coagulating all at once. And I chose abstracted figures of in moments of ecstatic dance, and collaged and drew them on these lenses. I really wanted to call attention to the lens, the way that the lens mediates our world. It's our visual prosthesis, it's how we experience the world, it's how we record the world. And I wanted to dissolve some of those boundaries between, you know, your body, that lens, and the other bodies. And so this is a 40-foot wall. We activated it, we precision mapped every drawing, and then had the brush strokes literally leap from the wall. Pieces of the drawings come off the wall and envelop the body of the viewer, so that the viewer hopefully would feel a sense of solidarity and belonging, and if not empathy, at least a sense of understanding. And unfortunately, nobody will ever experience this piece because nobody's ever going back to work, it seems. So outside the building, I also created an ancillary dancer. I imagined that she had sort of leapt off the wall, and I wanted to the reason I made a woman identified piece is because I really wanted to make a statement in this very male dominated industry. You're looking at the big Facebook, you know, all the buildings there that form sort of a U, and that's where this piece is still lives. And finally, Liberty Bell, my most recent project in Selma, Charleston, Washington, D.C., Rockaways, Philadelphia, and Boston. I was invited by the Art Production Fund to do a project initially in Philadelphia. And they said, you know, what would you do in Philadelphia? And I thought, well, I spent a lot of time there as a kid. And I had this, you know, really sticky image in my mind of the cracked Liberty Bell. It made a real impression on me as a kid. And I started thinking about liberty. And again, because I've been doing all this research on Civil War, et cetera, and to be fair, I'm a political junkie. I was thinking a lot about, what does that even mean? What does liberty mean as a concept? You know, liberty for whom? What is, you know, with our history of slavery and genocide and what we, you know, how the origins of this country, right? You know, what does it mean in a moment of pandemic and racial inequality and structural racism and racialized violence and disinformation and voter suppression, and I could keep going. Climate change, police brutality, you know, detention centers, unchecked nationalism, QAnon, right? What do these things mean? What does liberty even mean? And so they actually, as the idea developed, they said, let's expand it to these other cities. And so together we were very intentional about our choices. And I can get into that later too in Q&A if we have time, but I really wanted to trace it. There's no shortage of places where this could have gone, right? This could have gone anywhere in the United States, frankly. But we really wanted to trace a historic line from the genocidal, colonizing origins of the country in Boston, and trace it all the way down, knowing this would be an election year, trace it all the way down to Selma, to the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And all the civil rights struggles, actually even on the bridge. So, and I wanna make it really clear that when here it is outside of Philadelphia, over the Rocky Steps. You know, when we went into to different cities and communities, particularly, you know, I'm a native Bostonian, but so it was my first experience with Selma, if you can believe it. And so we were very intentional about consulting with community leaders in these locations about where they felt these pieces would be most resonant and most well received. In other words, we weren't going to just sort of come in and announce where we were putting them. So in Selma, for example, they felt strongly it should be next to the bridge. And, you know, I just want to say something about sound. You'll hear it a little bit more strongly in a moment. The sound in this piece is every bit as important to me as the visual, as the drawing. And, you know, I try to represent it not in a very abstract way, obviously, but it's sort of a cleft, a bell, an abstracted bell cut in half, made of these threads, red, white, and blue, that were in a state of constant struggle, essentially. And working alongside with my sound collaborator, Ana Luisa Petrisco, we developed a narrative almost to the sound, which starts like a lull, like a toll, and it becomes increasingly arrhythmic and dissonant. we actually sourced these sounds from all different points in history, both deeply historic and then futuristic and even synthetic. We were also invited in for the Rockaways to create a related piece to Liberty Bell. This is still considered Liberty Bell, but that addressed climate change directly and its relationship to this idea. So and it starts to get super chaotic, and it has a much simpler soundtrack. And again, unfortunately, I don't have great footage of Charleston, but having the Fort Sumter, the site of the original Civil War, in the background is very powerful. And very, very quickly, sorry, I'm a little bit over time. I had the great privilege of working on She Ascends, hosting She Ascends. This is an AR monument to Breonna Taylor, created by Breonna Harlan in Louisville, Kentucky. She and 21C. It was a collaboration with Alice Grace Stites, who's an incredible curator at 21C, and Breonna Harlan, and spoken word poet Hannah Drake. And Breonna Harlan got permission from Breonna Taylor's family to create this AR memorial, and it's outside of Metro Hall right now. If you ever have the opportunity to go there, I urge you to go see and experience it. We don't have a lot of time here. You can again see it on my website, but and as it plays, you can hear Hannah Drake doing this beautiful 2-minute sound piece that goes with the monument. So I urge you to do that. And most recently, I had another enormous privilege of hosting all of the AR skywriting, and more to come, I might add, for the for the project In Plain Sight, which is actually not an AR project, it's a skywriting project that was organized by 2 amazing artists here, Castles and Rafa. And it's an 80 artist collaboration where the artists came up with phrases of solidarity and hope and protest for all of the ICE detention centers, prisons all over the United States that are unlawfully holding immigrant populations and doing all sorts of horrible things, crimes against humanity. There's so much to say on that subject, but these are just a few examples. We decided that, for these, skywriting is ephemeral, even more ephemeral than AR. And this was a way, again, to be subversive and to have these messages live not only in perpetuity, but to be in that space, again, in that in-between space, which I forgot to talk about, the sort of here, not here, there, not there space, that liminal space, that in-between space that unfortunately so many people are in right now. But these are all very powerful messages. And I wanted to end this talk with actually the last slide, which says Nosotros te vemos, because in many ways, this idea of we see you not only applies here, so powerfully, but in all of the projects that the AR allows us to act in solidarity and to say, we see you, we hear you, we stand with you, this matters, this site matters, your story matters, etc. And I'm sorry, I love this. If you've heard me speak before, this is going to be perhaps annoying to you that I say this again, but Susan Sontag has this extraordinary quotation that I love to end with. She says, compassion is an unstable emotion. It needs to be translated into action or it withers. And I could not agree more. So if you want to check out more of the work, obviously you can go to either of those websites. Those are my Instagram handles. I'm also on Twitter, where I'm unabashedly political. And this is just, this piece, Ever Now, is now on the app. And I encourage you all to place it in the setting of your choice, or any of them really, and play around with it. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing the screen and reappear.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm back. And
Thank you so much, Nancy.
Yeah, I went a little over. I told you, I know this always happens. Anyway, I love the people I'm lucky to collaborate with. So
cool. All right. Does anybody here have any questions or any discussion points?
Please.
I would just like to ask about, so your whole data and surveillance focus. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to ask you, so our school is using something called Proctor Track. Have you ever heard of it?
Yes, I have. I don't know much about it, but maybe you mentioned it. I have heard about this. Yes.
Oh, I was just wondering if you had heard a lot about it and what your opinion on it is.
I'm not well informed enough to say. I know that that even the Zoom interface, even this platform, is highly problematic for many, many different reasons. And you know, part of what I feel is crucial to not just my practice, but I hope most people working in XR or digital media is to be in a state of constant awareness and critique of the tools we're using. You know, I'm interested in using them subversively, and to the extent that you can, if that is a highly problematic platform, which it sounds like it is, to the extent, sorry, I'm probably like encouraging insurrection here, but to the extent that you can use it subversively and in ways that are unorthodox and unexpected, I would encourage you to do so. Sorry, I'm never going to be invited back again, but that's how I feel. And I also want to just point out that, and I forgot to say this earlier, but like, you know, data collection is a real issue. And I don't collect any data with the app. Now, it is an app. If you're going to use the coordinates feature, it relies on GPS and and location services. So for activists, that can be problematic. Now, the truth is, and we all know, that that's not the only way you can be found. You can be found any number of ways. You can be identified any number of ways. And I could go down a whole rabbit hole about surveillance, and new tactics that are being used. But you know, again, I don't believe in sort of ceding territory to either, you know, to neutral, you know, there is no neutral territory, right? So I don't believe in ceding the tools to the makers. I think we need to use the tools in our own ways creatively to get around, to do workarounds and to figure out how to use them, like surveillance, the idea of surveillance.
I have a question about the devices that people use to experience your art. Is it mainly phones, like, you know, in these venues that people use, or are there more like advanced devices? Do people use, you know, Oculus Quest or Google Cardboard or?
As far as the AR experiences, right now it is limited, in fact, to yes, you know, phone screens and tablets. To me, that's, you know, it's imperfect. It's not fully accessible because, of course, AR software only exists on a certain generation of phone and, you know, and up. But it is, to my mind, one of the more accessible ways of experiencing this art. And again, your phone camera or the tablet camera acts as the visual prosthesis. I don't know, you know, again, maybe Kate, you would disagree, but like, I don't think AR wearables, I don't think they're going to be widely available to a broad population, especially given our economy for a long time. And as far as VR goes, that's another really interesting, you know, how cardboard is clearly the most accessible means of experiencing VR. The new Quest has all kinds of security issues associated with it, which are also very problematic. So yeah, for now, that's what I've got. And you know, there's a whole thing around 5G and whether it should be web AR. But for me, in terms of access and accessibility, because my geolocated things actually don't rely on Wi-Fi, it feels more equitable at the moment. But all of this stuff changes so quickly and rapidly that, you know. But your question is really well taken.
Well, thank you. I really loved seeing all your stuff. It's very exciting.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I know I was actually going to ask you too, Nancy, if you had played around with any of the AR headsets recently. I mean, they can do some really wonderful things, but it's just cost prohibitive at this point. It's like just under $3,000 for one headset. Like, you know, I mean.
Yeah, and even like Snap just commissioned me to do a lens, you know, and I use this for their spectacles, right, which are amazing. You can basically, it's a 2-camera, you can film, another LiDAR is coming out, but you could film volumetrically take 3D pictures and 3D video. Amazing, like as a tool, like I love doing it just for video. But they're, you know, I think they retail for like $380. That's a lot, you know, for most people. So yeah, most of the stuff is cost prohibitive. That's why I just, you know, to the extent that it can be accessed through, you 6S or above, or an Android with AR core, it still feels the most equitable. Anyone else?
I had a quick question. Just, I wondered if you might, I know we have a lot of students, this is kind of a two-parter. We have a lot of students who work in traditional media, but are, curious about kind of exploring these more maybe technical digital realms. And, that's how you came into AR originally. It was like, you were in traditional media and then moved into this other realm. What's your advice, I guess, for sort of bridging that gap, or like taking the first steps into moving into that digital space?
That's a great question. I moved into this space for purely conceptual reasons. And as you say, looking back, I guess it's something I'd been sort of stabbing at in the dark for a long time. I've been trying to create these immersive experiences, whether it was through video or sculpture or whatever. So I would say I wouldn't advise doing it just because it's kind of seems rad or cool. I would have a very clear idea of why the medium enriches, informs, deepens the work itself, the conceptual work. So what is it about, whether it's VR or whether it's 3D modeling or whether it's AR, whatever it is, like how does that expand the scope of what you're trying to accomplish? Or how does it help you accomplish it even more? You know what I mean? Because once it's a tool that you are familiar with, it will be as familiar to you as your pencil, your clay, whatever your traditional media is. If they become interchangeable on some level, and they will inform each other, and it becomes this like really beautiful creative loop. So I actually really encourage everybody, if you could find a good reason to do it, I encourage you to do it.
Hey, Nancy, thanks so much. My question is, it's also kind of for students, but for me especially. You've sort of stuck to this abstraction that comes out of your drawing that you've placed, but it's tethered to these political ideas or other things that you're interested in. How have you thought through the powers that abstraction that come from your drawings sort of correlate to these things, or why have you stuck to these more abstract imageries as opposed to just throwing up the Liberty Bell, I guess?
Because I have found, and this is my own personal, it's a great question, it's my own personal opinion. I think sometimes representing things in a way that's literalizing things can runs the risk of being didactic. And I feel that abstraction, again, back to this idea of access, offers a range of points of access for people. Because it's not sort of the age old, like that hackneyed, like, well, it can be whatever you want it to be. That's like, how people talk about abstract painting, right? They're like, well, anything. No, I really feel like as long as the abstraction is created, with intention again, and communicates an essential truth or feeling about that idea, then people really can write themselves into that text. They can write themselves into the experience in a way that allows a different type of freedom. That's what I've found. I think sometimes if it's too, not on the nose, but representational, it's hard for us to move around that. Now, you could also argue counter argue that and say, well, look at TikTok. TikTok takes a very specific thing and people do insanely amazing things with it, right? And arguably like one of the most creative platforms we have right now. But I think in terms of an art piece that is dealing with issues of a certain degree of complexity, it's not a meme. Abstraction is this wonderful kind of welcome mat for that experience.
Thanks.
And I know we have a couple, well, more than a couple students in here who are making work with very specific sort of activist bent to it. And I just wondered if you had any advice for them too, as far as just sort of pushing their work in that direction.
The only advice I would have is please keep doing it. I think we're in a moment, you know, in a polarized moment like this, you know, again, you know, yelling at someone to believe something is never going to work. But I think art has this amazing way of being able to sneak into an emotional place in a viewer that might open them up to discourse. And I think that, you know, the complexity of art and the complexity of these issues demands that. So if you have, you know, again, look, I'm also like, I was a little bit of a hypocrite. I did put Putin over Trump rally, okay? But in general, I think, you know, and I think you should also do salty things like that. But I think in general, using art to invite a more thoughtful conversation is a what could be better than that, particularly now, you know, especially with disinformation, especially post-truth, especially with a truly really alternate competing realities. So to the extent that you can do it, please do it. And also to help amplify voices that would otherwise not be heard. I think that's another really key piece.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I do want to be cognizant of time too, and make sure that you get a break before you head into studio visits with everybody. Is there anybody else, any last questions or comments or anything?
This is the quietest class I've ever seen.
Yeah, they are quiet today. All right. Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Nancy. This has been really wonderful. I'm, you know, so excited to just hear more about what you've been up to, of course. Yeah, and just what your future plans, what the Snapchat filter is going to be like. I can't wait to hear more about it.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure. I love talking about this. And yeah, if you have any follow-up questions or whatever, don't hesitate to reach out. You know, I see it all as a big conversation. So.
Okay, awesome. All right. So that's it for like just the main talk. So Nancy, yeah, feel free if you want to take a break, and then we'll come back in here and do breakout rooms for studio visits.
Okay, I'll just go grab some water. I'll be back.
Awesome. All right. Thanks
Thank
everybody
you.
for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if you're doing a studio visit, stay here.
Yeah. I see most people. Oh, actually, oh, good. Okay, Caleb's still here. Good. Zion.
I didn't leave yet.
Yeah.
Sorry I didn't show up to this class this morning, Ty. I was as I told Zion, I legit couldn't open my eyes this morning because I stayed up so late I stayed up so late this morning studying for my social exam.
Did it work?
Yeah, actually, but yeah, I'm kind of glad though I finished the what is it, art reading. But I was like this morning, I was just like, I woke up to the 7 o'clock alarm. I saw Zion. I was like, oh man, like I don't know if I can make it.
Yeah, it was a pretty heavy reading last night. So.
Yeah. But,
Hey Manya, haven't seen you in a while.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. And I saw Sterling as well, and I was like, oh my God, Sterling! And at that second, you said, oh, Sterling.
I had the same response. I'm like, oh my goodness, Sterling!
It's fun to see people.
I know, it was their little junior studios crew. Manya, I'm super excited for your studio visit. I think Nancy's going to be really great.
I have a new work that I literally just finished. I'm like covered in paint, but
Awesome.
I'm excited to show it to her. Yeah.
Good. Thanks everybody. Thanks Zion for helping get stuff together. Thanks Ty and Kate for pushing through with everything. Emily, have a great studio. All of you have great studio visits. Emily and I'm Caleb and Zion. I'm cheering on Seth or Manya and Emily because they're in class with me. So yeah, have a good have good crits. I'm excited for you.
So who's doing a visit right now?
I think Zion's first. Oh, I just had it up. Hold on a minute. I lost it. We've got Zion and then Caleb, then Emily, then Manya.
Okay.
I'm excited to
So-
listen in on all your crits. Just kidding. I won't do that unless you want me to.
You totally should.
I'm gonna hop
Wait,
between
are
all
we
the-
showing her our artwork, or are we going to see her artwork?
Yours.
Um,
Artwork.
Oh,
Are we
okay.
gonna keep this recorded?
Oh, actually,
yeah.
you know what? We can pause it. Actually, I don't think it records breakout rooms, right?
No, it
It
just
records
think
the main
so.
one, but
Okay.
you can just stop the recording. You can also trim it after the fact.
I can certainly do that. Actually,
Nancy,
do I have?
thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for spending time with our students again. I always wish we had more time. Like, just really awesome seeing your work and hearing you talk about it. And I love your encouragement of our students, even the spicy stuff. So yeah, I appreciate. And yes, you will be invited back to speak.
Thank you. I always worry a little bit, but I can't help it. We need that. Students are so good at that, you know?
Yes, absolutely, and we encourage it from our end as well. So grateful that you add that to it. I think it's really important and a valuable part of education, art education. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we definitely have to have you back when we're on campus, because I'd really like to have the students, like, you know, place your work around campus, and also just have them maybe try one of the VR pieces in the Genesis lab or with us too. That's the part that makes me the saddest about all of this, is like, you know, really need people to experience some of the VR work like in person too. And
Oh God, yeah, it
Yeah.
really does. And it's also just honestly, like, I love speaking. I'll speak in any venue, but there's just something I love about being in a space, you know, and you can, I don't know, it allows for a different type of spontaneity. And I mean, this is awesome too. It's just, I love in person, because then also, you know, people feel more comfortable, unprompted, you know, to say things and especially to respond to the work. It's really cool.
Okay, so I will do breakout rooms, and I'll put you, Nancy, and Zion into that room. I'll hang out for.
Side, it says advanced sharing options. All participants can share.
Oh,
I wonder if I leave and come back. Let me try.
okay.
Let's see.
What if, because it's just the three of us, what if we leave the room and go back into the main meeting?
Yeah, let's try that. Let's.
If we just leave the room, will we be punted?
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh yes. Okay, now I can.
Okay.
Awesome.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just gonna. So basically, this piece, which is just gonna take a second to. Okay. So this piece is again like about the partition in 1947, and a little bit more background is that so basically what they did is that they took, like, Pakistan was where there was a high Muslim majority, and India was where there was a high Hindu majority, and it was a British general who made the divide, and he basically took a pencil and took the map and drew it, and he had no context about India's history or politics or anything like that, and he just basically took a pencil and drew a line through the map. So what they did is that they had to shift within the matter of like a week to 10 days. Everyone had to switch sides because they were like, okay, if you're not comfortable staying in India as a Muslim, go to Pakistan, and like vice versa. So these trains were like packed full of like thousands of, like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, and they were just migrated, and they left everything behind in their home countries. Like everything was under government, like went to the government, because because they had to pack up and leave. So basically what I'm focusing on for this is my grandmother and her story, because she had to shift from Pakistan to India at that time, because of just all these riots and the violence that was going on both sides, that it became unsafe for one religion or one religion to stay on one side, if that makes sense. So this is basically her as a child, and this is like the symbol of the partition that I'm using here is like the train.
Hmm.
So, yeah, and
And these
I
are,
have like
it looks like is it ink or ink
Oh,
on paper?
it's a 5x6 canvas, and I used charcoal, and then I just kind of used water on top of that.
I was gonna ask if it was that or charcoal. Amazing.
So this is basically that, and I have a few. I should have loaded these earlier. I'm sorry. I just have a few. What's it called? Details of all of that.
Yeah, it's very evocative, and also like the way that you've like divided up the space on the canvas is really interesting too. And foregrounding her obviously is a really compelling choice.
I also I just wanted to tell. Okay, so what my idea was for I wanted to do like almost like a flip-flop sort of a, like on the other side I wanted to put a symbol of the partition today, and maybe draw her like present day her on the other side, because this would technically be the undivided Pakistan side of India, and then the other side would be like her standing in front of a symbol of partition on the in India today. So for that, I just have like a screenshot of what I was thinking. I'll just quickly like tell you about it. So I was thinking of having like this is like it's called like the first line of defense, and it's just basically like the barrier between India and Pakistan. Like this is exactly what it looks. This is it. Oops, I don't know what I've done.
We're in India looking at Pakistan.
Yes. Yeah. So this basically says, this in Hindi says, my India is, how do I, like not the best, but just like, yeah, is the best basically. But yeah, so, and then I would have her standing in front of it, and with the same hand action, maybe, or maybe reaching down to her as a child. So yeah, so again, like I'm just playing with the concept of borders, and I'm starting off with India, right? But if I have time, like towards the end of the semester, or if I have enough information, because I don't want to do it just for like, for the sake of it, but I also want to like do the whole concept of like borders justice. And so I want to maybe look at like different borders around the world, and like conflicts that are happening because of this. And yeah, so basically this, and also like in what I'm envisioning for the other works that I'm doing is also bringing up just the just like how how basically it was one country, right? So if you go to like places near the border, it's just like they're the same. I'm not explaining this very well, but like
No,
if
yeah,
so it's just like if you go near the border to, like, if you go to places that are right along the border, they're the same. It's the same exact place. They've just got like a barrier dividing them. And it's because it's like, yeah, sorry, I know like I'm rambling on a little bit. So like, but because like just for example, in Pakistan they speak Urdu, in India they speak Hindi, but 96% of our language is the same. So if I'm talking to like, if I'm talking to like one of my friends from Pakistan, we can easily talk in like Hindi and or Urdu, and we both understand each other completely because it's the same language. Or like we wear the same clothes, we're eating the same things, but it's just because of one man who decided to draw a line in that exact point, that it just, that there's still conflicts going on till today. And it's all like it's very political, most of the conflicts, because I mean, borders are political. But yeah, so basically this is what my idea for one piece was. And I have like another, sorry, I have another two pieces that I did that I'll show you. Okay, so again, like I was talking about Kashmir, and basically like again, like Kashmir has a higher Muslim population than many other states in India. And so I wanted to focus on Kashmir, one, because like most of my family is from Kashmir. So it's very like, it's, you know, it's very personal to me. And also because just because like there's so much that's gone on in Kashmir in the past, like in the past 100 years, that have just led to so many conflicts. And I also wanted to maybe look at borders, not physical borders, but borders just in a cultural or religious sense. So like a boundary or a border. So this specifically, this piece is like referring to like the political, cultural, and maybe like the social control that comes with living in Kashmir. So so basically just like borders in the sense of restraint, if that makes sense.
Of course.
Yeah. So so this is, she's basically dressed up in like the traditional headdress that a Kashmiri woman would wear. And yeah, and again, like the ties are a symbol of the restraint. And then I have one other piece that I finished. Yeah. So again, so this was, I was taking that concept and like just, I wanted to, I don't usually work on paper. I usually work on, or canvas. I usually work on like wood boards or cardboard, which like, it just, I find like the whole texture of it and like the experience of it more appealing. So anyway, so I wanted to, so this was maybe like sort of like a plan for what I would want to do. And then I'm still going to work on this, but this is like where I wanted to go with it. And again, like the whole same concept about like her wearing a like a traditional, oh okay, sorry, her wearing like a traditional Kashmiri outfit. And then again, the same sense of like, oh my god, I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, same sense of like borders and restraints. And because it's in Kashmir, so like a little bit of background on Kashmir. I'm like giving you a whole history lesson, I'm sorry.
No,
But
it's fascinating.
thank you. So like the whole history on Kashmir was that um, it was, so it was known to be one of like the most beautiful places on earth, with like it, like, you know, there's many lakes, there's many mountains and stuff like that. But because of what it is today, and because of just like government mandates and like religious divides and like protests and riots that have happened in the past, even in the past decade, there's been so much that's happened that it's kind of, it's become, it's the most militarized zone in the world today. And there's just curfews, there's a curfew, they've been under lockdown for 450 plus days now, because the situations were so bad. And what's happened to Kashmir now is that it's become a union territory of the central government in India today. So none of the decisions that are taken for Kashmir are by Kashmir. They're all by the central government in India, which is in Delhi, which ironically is where I am, like where I live. So it's just like this whole, you know, which, so the rest of India loves that Kashmir is under the central government. But like Kashmiris are just like, you've taken away our voice, you know. So yeah, so that, and also like going back to the whole border protest, why I wanted to focus on Kashmir is because right now India, Pakistan, and China are fighting over who Kashmir belongs to, which doesn't make sense because anyway, but they are all fighting over just the land, like, you know, just the land. And yeah, it's just a huge border conflict right now. And it's like last year, we, like India and Pakistan, the situation got so bad that we almost were at war with each other, but like it's died down a little bit. So yeah, so basically this is also why I wanted to focus on Kashmir. And just to translate like what's written here, there was a famous poet called Amir Khusru, who's a Farsi poet, and he wrote this couplet about Kashmir, and it basically translates to, if there's paradise on earth, it is here, it is here, it is here. So I wanted to put that on top of what this was written years ago, like it was written like, you know, decades ago, but when the situation in Kashmir was a lot better, and I wanted to put that on top of what I've drawn here, because I wanted to show sort of like a, like a two sides of, or just like a transition from what Kashmir used to be to what it is now.
Mhm. Well, you want to
So
hold those two things in contradistinction, that that it contradicts directly what we're looking at.
yes, exactly. So yeah, so this is what I've done till now, and like a little bit about what I'm planning on doing in the future. But yeah,
Well, I think that's a really, really that's rich territory as well, no pun intended. I was happy to see that you were also exploring borders outside of just geographic borders, because, I think there are any number of things that, separate people, and to the extent that those can become more porous, or you can identify those points of intersection or common shared ground, like when you're talking about the way that the land was literally just arbitrarily dissected.
yeah,
I think that's actually a very hopeful project, but it's also really important in the course of that project to underscore the injustice of it, right?
yeah,
It's in that case you had the bad luck to be in the in that place where your grandmother was, right? And I
yeah,
think when you start to examine borders among people, between cultures in more subtle ways, that's also a very, very powerful place to examine, who's, and really look at systems of power, who's in power, who's making these decisions, and how are people themselves complicit in participating.
yeah.
Mhm.
I
So
feel like, yeah, that's actually, yeah, that's a good point, because I feel like I need to yeah, because look more at like the system of oppression and like go to the top and see like, okay, who's actually in power. Because like again, with like the whole going back to the union territory under the central government rule, like Kashmiris, like most spokespeople of Kashmir, so like newscasters and just anyone who has any sort of say and power, have been under like house arrest for the past year and a half, because the central government doesn't want any sort of backlash. So yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting area to look at.
I think it's great, and it's going to resonate here for other reasons.
Yeah, actually, like someone saw my work, another student from one of my classes, and he said that he can connect us to Ireland, and I was like, that is exactly what I want people to do, is like take this and like like just
It.
go to another place altogether. So that's, yeah, that was really like,
Yeah, and look at Mexico. I mean, my friend
exactly,
Tanya that I referred to, she grew up at Playa de Tijuana. That there was no wall through her beach.
yeah,
We're doing a
that's,
celebration right now, which is all about border walls, and it's because it's devastating.
it really is. And it's just sad that people don't have any say in it. It's not like the citizens who have any like too much say in it. It's just done by the people who are in power. But yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. I want to be cognizant of the time too for you, Nancy. We're a little bit over. But yeah, I had recommended that Manya look at Beatrice's work. Well, actually, you can see it in the tab. Beatrice's and Anna's work too.
Oh, and Tanya, there it is. Oh, and Anna, that's amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, if there was anyone else that sprang to mind, I mean, there's a lot of really good work being done right now, I think, about borders, and actually a couple other people just came to mind too. But yeah, if there's anybody else that you think might be good for Manya to look at.
Yeah, let me think on that one.
There
If
was
I think about it, I'll email. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, there was somebody I was in grad school with back in like around 2015, who he did a lot of like kind of media artwork, but he took like Google images of the entire US Mexico border and then made a giant accordion book of like all the Google images, satellite images like of the entire border. And then that was like actually part of his thesis piece. And then the whole book was like put out on the floor throughout the gallery, which was kind of interesting. I'll see if I can dig that one up because you might just enjoy seeing that. It's totally different medium than what you're working with, but you might just kind of like the thought. Oh, my internet connection's unstable. Hold on, I'm shutting off my video.
A fraction of what you said, but you started to cut out.
Oh gosh. All right, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, I was just, I'll dig up that work of my friends from grad school and send that over to you, Manya.
Thank you.
I can tell I keep getting the notification that my internet's unstable, which is, typical for here, clearly. But yeah, if there's anybody else that comes to mind, Nancy, that I'm sure, yeah, Manya, you'd appreciate that. But yeah, no, thanks so much for coming.
Oh, it was a pleasure. I just want to make a little bit of a mind bendy, stretchy suggestion, which is going to feel very far afield to you, Manya. But I think it will expand. If you do this, I think it will expand even what a border means to you. And actually, it's a movie. I don't know, Kate, if you've seen this movie. Sorry, like rocked my world. I'm obsessed with it, and I'm using it. Kate, I forgot to talk to everybody about my fellowship, which is all about. It actually doesn't involve AR at all. It's AI and VR and drawing and all other stuff, but and wearable technology. But anyway, I watched this for it, and it's called Border, and it's a Swedish film. Have you heard of it?
I haven't, but
No.
I'm gonna.
Weirdest. It won. I think it was 2 years ago. It won that award at Cannes that they give to projects that they don't know they know they're amazing, but they don't know how to categorize it. And I actually don't want to tell you more about it. It might disturb you. I hope it doesn't. It's not necessarily the easiest film to watch, but what I think it does is really pull apart what it really interrogates the idea of boundaries and borders and looks at them with this very with a perspective that I'd never considered. And I think it's not political per se. It is more related to, I don't even tell you what it is. I just think you should watch it. It's Swedish. You might have to pay for it, but it is one of the most gripping, inventive, shockingly original films I've seen, and it never could have been made by an American. It's just amazing. So just to take your concept of border and make it even bigger.
I'm going to definitely watch this, because I feel like just the more insight I have on like this whole, because like I haven't personally had any experience with border partition. Like it's other people's experiences. So I feel like this will give me more of an insight.
Well, yes, again, it's strictly in the realm of the metaphoric and the poetic, but I do think I can't be enough. Yes.
I'm going to watch it.
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. It was really fun.
Thank you so much for taking the time to give us all so many like advice.
Oh, it's so great. This is really the fun part. I'm so sick of hearing myself speak. I can't even tell you. I just wait to get through.
I just told Kate this as well, and I think it was a very good talk. So it was great.
Well, I'm glad you think so. Thank you.
Yeah, and Nancy, it's Pepperdine's a really wonderful place, but it is also very conservative.
Oops.
Politically. Well, no. That's one of the reasons why having you and Nicole, and like that's what we try to do in the art department, because like we're obviously one of the more like liberal sections of the college, and I think there's a lot of students who maybe don't feel fully comfortable exploring some of the issues that they really want to. And I'm really like, I don't know if you know Jane Mee, but she's kind of started this lecture series when she was working here, and like her goal was to like bring in women and women of color and just really kind of make it a safe space for a lot of the students to feel like they can make the work they want to make. Because like, Gretchen and Ty have been really doing that for a super long time too, but we're trying to be extremely, extremely deliberate about it now with the current climate and everything too. So
amazing.
Yeah.
Well,
so
I'm happy to have been a part of it.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to have you back when, we can have you come to campus and actually hang out instead of
that.
Yeah, it'd be really wonderful.
We'll go beers after.
I would love that. Yeah, I'm going to attempt to turn my video on again and see if, okay, there we go. I hate having my video off when we're doing talks like this. It feels, I was telling Manya, it makes me feel like I'm disengaged in a way, and I don't know. Anyway.
Oh God. No, the voice thing is everything. Like it is amazing. It's wonderful to see, but like, as I say, I'm so sick of looking at myself and hearing myself.
Yeah. And I think it was really good for a lot of the students that came tonight. Like I was saying, like they're probably not half, maybe a third aren't art students. They're in my art class, but their majors might be something else. And I don't know, I can't really speak to what the rest of their experiences at Seaver, the general undergrad experience. But I do think that there needs to be more places at Pepperdine and on campus that people feel a little bit safer talking about, different sides of the political spectrum than they might be used to hearing. So
Amen to that.
yeah. But yeah, I'm super excited to hear about, everything else you've got going on too. Like, did you say the Borders, that's a fellowship or?
The fellowship is through the Bird Ruin Institute, and it's this whole
Okay.
the post-human thing.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm doing a two-part project. One is in VR and one is wearable. And it's all related to, actually also related to human behavior, but also knowability and exteriority and interiority and all this stuff. But I'd watched Border actually for more like post-human reasons. And just another artist had recommended it to me. And I walked in cold, not knowing anything about it. And I was like, wow, like one of those things, like unforgettable. And it's deeply weird. It's so weird and so amazing.
I'm so excited to watch this. I'm very
I
excited.
traumatize you, but I really think you're going to get something out of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Well, we've kept you probably way too long, but yeah, we should get another Zoom hang on the books.
I would love that. That would be so
Okay,
great. I want to hear what you're doing too. And I don't want to catch up on